or Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague from York Simcoe for he's used to wading into deep waters, and he's done a great job of speaking on this one tonight. As I rise today, unfortunately, I rise with heightened awareness of just how divided Canadians have become. This emergency debate is predicated on that very reality. A lot of people are angry right now. On any given day, I hear from people who think that we have too many restrictions, and I also hear from those who want even further imposed. In all my years in politics, I've never seen such heated debates, which has caused a lot of tension in families and in communities throughout Canada. To clear up any misunderstanding, I am vaccinated. I believe they are safe and have helped reduce hospitalizations. I believe they have saved lives, particularly those who are older and have underlying health conditions. I have also encouraged others to get vaccinated. But I want to be able to question the Liberal government's COVID policies without being labelled anti-science, anti-vaccination, or without being discredited because I have the audacity to criticize government policies. For too long, we have been given a false choice that either we acquiesce to every government measure or we are only lending credibility to those who spread false information. The one thing I know for sure is that the political environment we now find ourselves in is directly related to this mindset. Without a doubt, COVID-19 has been hard on all of us. Families have lost loved ones, and many individuals have suffered or are suffering illness. Families in my constituency have been prevented from driving across the border to be with loved ones. University students have been unable to set foot in a real classroom and be able to take advantage of a full educational experience. Healthcare staff in particular have been pressing on for 2 years to care for those with COVID and all other healthcare concerns. They've provided an essential service, and we are grateful for their commitment and sacrifices on behalf of their fellow Canadians. And to those who think that protesting in front of hospitals is a good idea, I can assure you it isn't. The doctors and nurses working in those hospitals are busy saving lives, not setting government policy. The last thing they should have to deal with when coming off a long shift is the sight of angry placards or shouting protesters. Grocery store staff immediately come to mind, as do all those involved in our supply chain, including truckers. It may seem thankless to work in these positions during a time like this, but I hope every single one of them knows how critical they've been. It was on this understanding that governments made a point of underscoring which workers were essential at various times throughout the pandemic. We all understand that we owe a debt of gratitude to these workers. We all want them, we all want them to know how their contributions have helped all of us through this time. And yet, here we are today. After 2 years of truckers being deemed essential workers, the Liberals decided they no longer were. After 2 years of praising their efforts doing what they do best, delivering the goods we rely on, the Liberals decided truckers weren't really essential after all. But the obvious question is, why? What changed, Mr. Speaker? I get the fact that many don't understand why a certain percentage of truckers don't want to get vaccinated. I get the argument that the vast majority of other Canadians have gotten vaccinated, so why wouldn't the others? Regardless of your frustration with those who won't get vaccinated, we all must have compassion and try to understand that no matter the mandate imposed upon them, they simply will not. At this stage of the pandemic, we must ask ourselves, what reasonable benefit could society and our economy attain from the trucker mandate? The Liberals have failed to give any rationale whatsoever for the decision. And if they're holding on to data indicating that the truckers have been responsible for COVID outbreaks, they've never shared it with Canadians. This lack of transparency is unfortunate. Canadians deserve to know whether the mandate on truckers is justified. They deserve to know whether the benefit of taking truckers off the road outweighs the impact of our economy, to our economy. Worse yet, this government either has no framework for lifting mandates, or if they do, they sure have a funny way of communicating it to the public. We can all appreciate that this situation is fluid. But the government should be able to explain what metrics it is using to determine the scope and speed for removing mandates. On what basis is it making its decisions? There's nothing strange about Canadians wanting transparency from their government. In fact, if the government had the government been more open with us, with its federal response, perhaps we wouldn't have seen the same levels of angst among Canadians. Perhaps we wouldn't have seen the same levels of frustration from millions of Canadians who are eagerly awaiting an end to lockdowns and restrictions. It should go without saying at this point, but people are tired. People are frustrated. After 2 years of personal sacrifices, many are looking to this government to explain the path forward. But to date, it seems like they're waiting in vain. Many Canadian public health officials are signaling that they want to make a shift in policy. BC's chief medical officer has indicated their COVID response is transitioning to become, quote, much more like how we manage influenza, end quote. As she stated, and I quote, we cannot eliminate all risk, and I think that's something we need to understand and accept as this virus has changed and has become part of what we will be living with for years to come, end quote. In reply to the last question that was asked of my colleague, Ontario's chief medical officer has also said something similar. I absolutely think, quote, I absolutely think we have to start to learn to live with this virus, and we've let our lives be controlled for the last 2 years in a significant amount of fear, end quote. That's from Ontario's chief medical officer, Mr. Speaker. And Canada's top doctor is noting the need, quote, to be able to address the oncoming presence of COVID-19 in a more sustainable way, end quote. Looking around the world, many countries are removing restrictions or laying out their framework to do so. In the United Kingdom, it's been mentioned in the House many times today, vaccine passports have been dropped. Sweden is removing entry restrictions and domestic rules, and Denmark ended their COVID restrictions last week. A recent Angus Reid poll showed that a majority of Canadians, quote, now say it is time to remove restrictions and let Canadians manage their own level of risk, end quote. If the Prime Minister disagrees with most Canadians, then it's incumbent upon him to explain his rationale. I doubt the Prime Minister wants to unfairly label millions of Canadians as quickly as he labelled those who partook in the convoy as it made its way through Canada. Protests are occurring in communities across the country, but none are more pronounced than what we've seen outside this very place. He's painting every protester with a broad brush, name-calling, dismissing even the most genuine concerns about his government's actions over the last 2 years. There were literally thousands of people lined up on highways in support of the convoys. The only message they're hearing from this Prime Minister is that because they're supporting the convoy, they too must be beyond redemption. Make no mistake, I denounce all symbols of hate and have zero tolerance for illegal behavior. Anyone who participated in that manner should be ashamed of themselves. Moreover, I think everyone outside should immediately minimize their impact on those who live downtown here in Ottawa. But my message to both the government and to the protesters is turn down the rhetoric, turn down the heat. We must remember, we are all citizens and remain so and will remain so after this. We cannot continue to just talk past each other. We will get nowhere if we continue this. The Leader of the official opposition has requested a meeting between the Prime Minister and other party leaders so we can come together, depoliticize the response to the pandemic, and talk about where we go from here. Canadians need leadership. They need to see a plan. They need hope. On this side of the House, we're prepared to work together to end this protest and help families and communities return to their normal lives. I hope all parties will join in this effort.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.